Okay, so we're here with, I'm going to say my favorite, everybody is my favorite, but my favorite admissions dean, Dean J from UVA, and you're broadcasting live on campus this year from UVA.
Yes.
Is that different for you?
Absolutely. A very different setup.
I was telling you before we started, those chairs feel very UVA to me. So if anybody doesn't know, I am a UVA law alumni. I think that we always pretend like that's so significantly different because we have our own little campus there, but the spirit is still there. And I did say Wahoo Wah for the first time last year as a Virginia Tech alumni. So we're getting there, you know, so but I appreciate
we say that well, in my office, we say we're siblings unless it's game day. Game day, all bets are off. But otherwise, we're friends.
I feel like Virginia Tech is like, we're not even siblings. Virginia Tech is very indoctrinated into the culture. They don't want I think they always are like, we're the big sibling now. So but yeah, just kind of talking about what's going on with applications and how are you successful? Because right around the corner is early admissions. When is your early decision deadlines?
November 1st for the early rounds, yeah.
So let's just like kind of jump into it. The first question, because a lot of students have this perception that college admissions officers do not want to tell them the truth. They want to hide the ball. They want to, so you always have to find like an inside source, somebody who's going to give you the information. Why, and I know you create a lot of content so that students have information. Why should people trust you, and why do you want people to be successful in the application?
Well, first of all, I have to read thousands of applications. And if I tell people what I want to see in essays, then I enjoy reading the essays. So it's in my best interest to give students tips on how to do things. In addition, like things like not repeating yourself or using the sections of the application that we use and not feeling the need to send supplements and extra things.
Right.
Like, again, it's in my best interest. It helps me focus on the most important parts of the file. It helps my processing team who has to file all the things, even if it's something we're not using, they still have to file it and do something with it.
Keep a record.
And also, I think maybe I'm unusual, but I remember this process distinctly from when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And I do think a lot of admission officers in part are doing this because they remember how scared and how scared they were and how little information there was. And so the fact that we have social media and the internet to connect with students is amazing for us, because when we did this, well, at least when I did this, you didn't have the internet in your home.
Yeah.
And so you sent your things away and you just hoped that if something was wrong, someone would contact you. And you would just start waiting. You'd wait to hear that letters started arriving in mailboxes.
Yeah.
And your poor letter carrier was like the most popular person in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because they were the ones with the information. That was it. No one had anything.
So I was like waitlisted for undergrad at UVA. I don't even know if I like went back and did anything, because I ended up like really liking Virginia Tech. And my mother to this day, if I went and asked her what day did that letter come in the mail, so she could tell you. I think it was May 1st. She's like, May 1st.
Yeah.
It came in May 1st because it was such a like, you know, I went down to the mail. It was just such a dramatic day. And I think that even though you have emails now, and obviously going back to paper is just not the same, having that paper experience, I don't know, it feels very college to me to like open up a letter. But I think, you know, it's like, and how thick is the letter was the big thing back in the day.
Yeah.
And I think sorry. I think I also got a letter from UVA Law, but the letter was thin, and I was like, but then it was a good letter. And then the next letter was like my financial aid package and whatever. So it was tricky.
Yeah. I think there's always this discussion of speed versus ceremony.
Yeah.
It depends on your personality. Like my personality is like speed. I don't need it to look pretty. I just want to know the answer. But I
want a
know some
production.
people, when we tell them that we used to get things in the mail, like, oh, that'd be really nice. Like, I remember people like lining up at lunch at the payphone at school to call home to see if someone could check the mail. Like, is there a big envelope or a little envelope in the mail today?
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think that's going into the second part, because like, I feel like UVA is a production school. Like it is a very ceremony school. It's first year, it's grounds. What is the spirit of a UVA student that you're kind of looking for? And I know it changes from class to classes. Every class is different, but overall, like what are you always kind of looking for? What traits and things like that?
Well, first of all, I always tell people like there are 18,000 undergraduate students here, and they're in lots of different schools and colleges. So the vibe of the class overall, which winds up being about 3,900 students, that can be one thing, but then there can be a different vibe for the nurses versus the architects versus the engineers. So it's not that there's one UVA student, but I like how you put this, because I think there are like common traits. Clearly we have students who are curious, who are open to diving into things. This is not a school where you are admitted directly into a major for the most part and told, here's what it means to be an architect. Yeah. Even if you're in a major, you're going to be told there are certain competencies that you have to fulfill, but you need to make choices about how you're going to show them. So, and it's funny, just this morning, we had a couple transfer students in our staff meeting. Both of them happen to be from Nova, one from Nova Woodbridge, one from Nova Manassas. And they were saying, they were saying like they were so used to being told this one class fits this requirement, that the shift to being told, okay, so you have to show that you fulfill this requirement, but there are lots of ways to do it. That's an adjustment sometimes, and that's probably an adjustment for a high school student too. But I think you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with knowing I need to do a little bit of work here to decide what my path is. There are 100 different ways to be a bio major. I'm going to try to work with my resources to figure out the path that works for me. So I think being comfortable with open-ended kind of questions also kind of ties into that. The other thing I think is interesting, and I don't want people to think that we're obsessed with changing things, but there is this current here that says you're going to leave UVA better than when you got it. And we kind of put the name student self-governance on it, though sometimes students are like, I don't want to be in charge. It's not that the students are left to run the school, it's that where appropriate, we will put them in the driver's seat. And sometimes that's uncomfortable, especially if you're coming from a school where there are really strong advisors and very strong leaders that are telling you what to do. Here, like, yes, we're going to lead you, but we're also, when it's time, we're going to put you in the driver's seat and tell you, like, do it. And you have to be comfortable with messing up. You have to be okay with failing, because you're going to learn something through that too. Like in your student group, your first event may flop. But you're going to learn how to run your next event even better. Okay, and maybe it'll be great, and then you'll be also.
And maybe it'll be another one where you have to iterate.
But I think curiosity, being comfortable with charting a course and reaching out and using your resources, because this is a school that has resources, but people aren't going to come and knock on your door and say, I heard that you were thinking about law school. Let's talk about that. There's going to be a poster somewhere. It's going to say, hey, there's a law school advisor, and you can go talk to them. But you need to be comfortable saying, I'm paying for that, and I'm going to take advantage of it. And then I think you have to be comfortable with being told that you're in charge a little bit. Even in the first couple of years.
And also, like, I feel like what you're saying is kind of like the spirit of an explorer. Like, I'm willing to explore new ideas, but also, maybe not always be in the leadership position, know when I need to fall back, when I need to step up, but also taking the initiative and willing to iterate, right? So you know, like it feels very UVA to me, right? And that's why when people say like, why to me, why do they want you to be successful? Because at the end of the day, you can have a really successful application. And I know this is going to sound scary. You can have a very successful application, but it's not the right application for us, right? Like it's just, there's something about, so we want you to be as successful as possible so that we can know that you're a good fit for us, right? Because what's a good fit for another school might not be a good fit for here. So let's make sure that you're in the driver's seat as quickly as possible so that we can make the right decision for you, as opposed to like, we just want to reject you. And that's why we're tricking you, which doesn't always make sense to me.
Yeah, our office has not gotten pressure to drive up the applications. That obviously happens at some schools. And the pressure. I mean, the apps going up has happened here, and that's a function of lots of different things. I mean, there are people who can study that forever and say it's about the basketball team, or it's about that news story, or it's about the common application. There are lots of reasons that applications go up, but the powers that be have not pressured us to coax students into applying here to get to a certain application number, which is nice. It's nice for us.
Yeah. And then, you know what, I'm gonna ask you one question, and I know we kind of like went over some of the questions, but I feel like you're prepared for this. When a student feels less confident with their test score, should they continue to push forward, maybe take a test again, or are you okay? I love that you're like, nope. So I guess I'm trying to explain to students that if you don't feel confident with your test score, if everything else makes you feel like this is a great application, but your test score makes you feel like, nah, that's a great time to explore test optional. But I think a lot of students feel like there's a lot of risk with test optional. Can you explain to students, you know, does the process change for you? And is it a risk for them to apply optional here? And when should they feel comfortable applying optional?
Okay, so my joke is that this change to going test optional has saved me 4 seconds for certain files.
Right.
The bulk of the time you spend reading a file is spent analyzing the transcript, which is about individual courses and grades, not about a GPA, because GPA is not standardized. So it's actual courses and the progress and the trends, reading recommendations and reading essays. That is the bulk of the time you spend. Those are the 3 largest components of the review. The testing piece is a couple seconds. It's not even a required piece anymore. So it doesn't drive your decision. No one would ever start their pitch for one of their students by saying, and they scored a this on the math section. Because other people in the room could say, well, I have 5 kids like that. Can I have all of my kids? Right. No, you're going to start the conversation with the things the student has done that build a case. And the test score is kind of like, if it's there, it's almost like a topping on a sundae. But no one's ever going to say like, just give me a cup of sprinkles. No, you want the ice cream, right? And
I don't know. I kind of like sprinkles too. Yeah. But I love that you said sprinkles, because like some people are going to have like, oh, I want nuts. I want sprinkles. Like I have an AP. And I think that's the thing that students don't understand. Like some of you are submitting AP scores. Some of you are not submitting AP scores. Some of you are submitting this randomized standardized test that you took in your SAE. Other people are not submitting it. So there's different toppings on your application. I love that.
I think you've just stumbled on something that I'm going to try to develop, that the application is like those self-serve ice cream places where you put the ice cream in the cup and then you can go walk down the row and add whatever toppings you want. No one's going to say that the topping was the more important part. Like the ice cream is the main part. The toppings are those optional items that you add on. So your sprinkles aren't going to make someone say that was a great ice cream. No, the ice cream is what makes someone say,
like if you have a bad ice cream. And I think, you know, one of the things that I try to talk to students about is like the 4 years matter. And I think a lot of students have this impression that I could do these 4 years and I could mess up on this application and it all be over. And it's like, but the 4 years could be the thing that closes you and the application is like, the application wasn't strong, but the 4 years are strong. And there's enough evidence here to make a case. Because you're really, as somebody who went to UVA Law School, you're really building the case so that the admissions officer can advocate for you rather than against you. So that you can essentially, I feel like a good application makes you feel like you're in the room with the admissions officer and you're lingering behind them. So even if they put you in the wait list pile or the denied pile, they might wake up and be like, it's still here. Like, this student's still in the back of my mind. Was that a good decision?
That's funny you say that, because there have definitely been times where, like, 30 minutes after reading a file, I circle back. I'm like, wait, I need to go look at that one again. Yeah. Now I'm thinking about it a little bit differently. And that's why, like, this whole thing takes a long time, because it's not one and done for the most part.
Right.
You wind up revisiting files a few times throughout the course of the season. And there are definitely, I'm very plain about this. There are times when I'll look back at something I read in early November and be like, well, that was an interesting take, but now I know a lot more about who applied, and I know more maybe about what's going on at that student's high school this year. So my take is going to be slightly different.
Yeah, we evolve throughout the process. So, like, and I think we've already kind of covered this. What makes a good application, and what does a UVA team do differently, if anything, that you've noticed, and like how your approach and how it's evolved over the years?
Yeah, so I don't know so much about how schools of our volume do things. We get, I'm just going to round up and say 50,000 applications. And I would say, I do know of a large school, not in Virginia, that does like an initial academic review. So they don't read the whole file until they confirm, like, the academics are here. And there's like another, so we don't do that. We read every file front to back. And I'm using paper language because that's how it started here, but we read
it still
every
feels
file,
paper to me. Yeah,
the whole thing before you render a decision. And that's what holistic means, which, it's funny, a lot of people just decided holistic means that the things I like matter more. So, like, I think I have good activities, so holistic means the activities can get you in. No, the academics still have to be there, but holistic means we have to read everything in the file before we make a decision. We can't say this isn't going to work right off the bat, because you need to understand if there are circumstances that are affecting the academics, if there are moves involved. You know, there's so much that can provide context for the transcript. So I do think maybe schools of our size and larger, probably because of the numbers, have to do things differently than we do. And I'm not saying we'll always do it this way. We always are reading the whole file before we make a decision.
And let's circle back, because I feel like a lot of students feel like a good SAT score can make up for a bad GPA or a lazy, year or years where I didn't take the strongest classes. And I'm like, it's not that gap filler that you think it is. It's not going to be the thing that like can make up for it. Could, again, it's a topping. So I
distinctly remember sitting across from my counselor when I was in high school, and she went like this, and she was like, well, if these are your academics and these are your test scores, if your test scores are higher, your academics can, I mean, she was literally going like this, and I was like, okay, what do I know? I'm 17 years old. That sounds legitimate to me. But now I know these are all separate components. I tell people it's like pieces of a puzzle, but different sized pieces. Like the testing piece is a 4-hour piece. The transcript is a 4-year piece.
It's a chunk.
It's part of the package, but you can't just stuff it in there and think,
like,
it makes up for it.
Now it's ice cream.
Now my sprinkles are ice cream.
So a lot of students, and this came up in our support group this weekend, a lot of students are like, but how do I stand out? How do I stand out? And a lot of students think you all are like taking pieces of paper and like, not paper, of course, they know it's online, but I don't even know if they think of paper anymore. But they're thinking like, you're looking at this applicant and you're looking at this applicant. How do I make sure that they're looking more at me? How do I stand out? Do students have to stand out in the application itself to be successful? And if they're not standing out, if they're vanilla, can they still get in to UVA? Or Does it have to be a production in order for it to work?
This question.
Yeah.
So we are going to admit 10,000 people.
Yeah.
Everyone doesn't have to stand out.
Right.
Now, once upon a time, I worked at a very, very small school.
Yeah.
Tiny. Yeah, you had to stand out. But here, your application does not have to stand out. And I talk about essays a lot because I think that's where students feel like they have to do something unusual, say something avant-garde or like really controversial. And like, no, most kids talk about really normal things.
Right.
And what makes them stand apart is that they're talking about their own personal experience with that thing, as opposed to talking about everyone who experiences it. So instead of talking about why everyone who has heard this song is moved by it, I want to hear a student talk about like, this song affected me in these ways and it stays with me and here's how it affects me. Like, that's how you stand out. It's not, I save people on the weekends from, I don't know, you're a volunteer firefighter and you save people, you know, that's amazing. But like, that's not the level of standing out that is needed.
Right.
It's making your application personal. That's how you stand out. But again, it's not that you have to be totally unique and different from every other kid.
Right.
It's that we have to learn something about you through your part of the application, that isn't coming through in the other areas.
Right.
That's what sets someone apart.
And you said something that's really interesting, because a lot of students told me, well, there's so many applications, so I have to stand out. And what you said is, if it's a smaller pool, you have to stand out. But if it's a bigger pool, you just need to be more personable. So personable is standing out. Do you ever do the parent trap scenario where it's like, what, they're so similar, who am I going to pick? Does that ever, come up?
Never. We've never gotten it. The way our review works is, first of all, our school is large enough that you don't have to land on a dime. No one's going to say, you must have 3,892 students.
Right.
No, they say, your goal is like 3,875-ish. And if we're over or under, like, it's fine. So I kind of compare it to like when they bring at the airport, when they bring a plane up to the airport, the plane just kind of gets close to the airport, and then it's up to the gate agent to come and like get that tunnel or the stairs to the door. Right. So like, we're flying a plane and we're like, we made it, we got really close. And then the rest of UVA comes and is like, okay, now we're gonna make sure that all these kids have a place to sleep, eat, etc. Yeah. So it's not like we have to land like bink right there. It's we have to get close, and then they will take over and make sure everyone's taken care of. So that there's some freedom there. And that also means that as we're reading, there are points in the process where you check in with the numbers and you say, well, how are we looking on engineers? How are we looking on architects, nurses, etc.? And that's when we can say, hey, there's still room for like 50 in-state engineers. And then everyone's like, sweet, I have kids on my list.
It's like, perfect. And I think that's the thing. It's like, I think students think that y'all are just sitting there like, how do I reject more children this year? Like, and because they think like, and they've heard like that drives up the rankings. Like, how do we reject more? And they're not realizing the applications are going up. So
and most admission officers don't care about the rankings, because we know the methodologies are shuffling to create the mix. It's not like UVA is a dramatically different school than it was a year ago, but like the methodology has been tweaked. Like US News came out yesterday, right? And like we shifted us like one spot. I don't even know. See, because I don't care. But
how do you feel about that?
But it's like, I'm sure that the methodology, the calculation they used changed slightly. So that caused a school that is pretty much the same school as it was a year ago to move in the spot, right? Right. So that's why we were kind of like, and we also know that because we work with high schools, they give us calculations like GPA and rank, and we know like, well, there's a methodology behind this. Right. A GPA and rank don't tell me what I need to know. Similarly,
y'all are diggers. You're diggers.
Yeah. And I would hope that a student, I made a TikTok about this, like students should look at the methodology, because some of the stuff that these groups are using are probably things that an undergraduate student would be like, I don't care about that. That doesn't affect me. But
At all.
This magazine thinks it's important, and that's fine. But my ranking wouldn't include that as a item.
Right.
So I kind of wish people would just kind of step away from those.
The narrative is like COVID has changed everything in admissions. Everything has changed. Do you feel like everything's changed?
I don't. I think that
same. I'm like saying. I sometimes ask questions to be like, "Are you thinking the same thing I'm thinking?" Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just added to what we do.
Right.
In a way, it's great because schools that were not doing a lot online were forced to work to do more things online,
right? Because
that was their way to connect with students. I think though it's interesting because the virtual stuff will never go away now.
Yeah,
perfect. So now it's about figuring out what's the right mix of in-person and virtual. And we do hear, you know, especially schools that have regional reps, meaning someone who lives in your area, they are on the ground already, they are in schools, whereas many of us were like, are we doing this? What are we doing? Like, and this week.
And I feel like every day I'm like, am I leaving the house? Like, am I?
Are we really?
Yeah. Are we going to have an event in person? I'm thinking maybe we might have an event in person this year. Yeah. And I think that, to me, everybody, I think there's a lot of fear that like everything's changed, and I didn't even know the last system, and nobody could figure out the last system, and now there's a new system. So let's start like kind of narrowing down who should apply early, because we're in Northern Virginia, by the way, for those of you who don't know. Like, I'm in Northern Virginia. I'm near the IKEA. If you ever drive down 95, feel free to stop at our IKEA. It's very nice, but there is an early admissions culture, and it's like, if you don't get in early, you're not getting in. And I remember last year in our group, everybody wanted to apply early, especially to UVA. And then some of them were just so burnt that they didn't feel like they could do a good application. I was like, you're still going to have a good chance. They're like, no, not going to happen, not going to happen. And then they still got in. So who should apply early, and what makes, I don't know if I'm going to say what's the deciding factor, because you know where I'm going. Who should apply early?
Yeah. And I think this answer is different from school to school. So this is UVA specific. For us, our actual process doesn't change. How we read a file doesn't change. Right. And since we put early action back on the table probably 10 years ago, we've seen that the early action pool is the strongest pool. So what I always tell students is, you see a slightly higher offer rate for the early action group. That's not saying it was easier. It was saying, listen to us when we say this is when the strongest students apply. So if you have time during the fall to put in an application early, awesome. But just know that if you are scrambling because you don't have time, don't put it in there, because you're putting yourself in a very talented pool.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to scare people away. It does have a higher offer rate. We do take a lot of students from there, but it's not like, there are schools where they're going to take the majority of their class during the early rounds. That doesn't happen at UVA. Right. But the pool is shifting, and it is, there are a lot of Nova kids in those early rounds. I think if you have time to put together an application you can be proud of, then one of the earlies makes sense. But
if you're still growing,
if you're rebounding from anything, you wait. And also just, you have to look at what your fall looks like. If you are heavily involved in fall activities and you can barely have time to eat with your family, you should not be submitting an early application to UVA. You should wait for regular, because there's so many students who say, man, once school was over in December, like everything eased up. I had time to be more thoughtful and really edit those essays, which is the one thing you control at this point, right? Your essays. I think that you can feel better about your app. Yes, it is a longer wait. They wait until April 1. We're usually a little bit early on that, as opposed to December 15th for the early decision kids and February 15th for the early action kids. And we are usually a little bit early on those. But I just think like we have to just remember that this is also about putting together an app you can be happy with.
Yes, confident with. Yeah.
There are definitely schools that are more lenient on the early rounds. And so, yeah, you're going to try to get that app in. But for UVA, I think you have to think about, when is my strongest application going to be ready?
Right. And then also it's like, if you were strong enough for early, you were always going to be strong enough for UVA. It doesn't shift. And even those schools that are like, it's easier to get in early. If you're competitive, you're still competitive. So like, I know like there's one school that always comes up for test optional where they're like, it was 95% test optional. I'm like, right. So 5% got in. Like 5% of people, like I want to know that story, that 5% of kids who were like, I'm still strong. I'm still here, you know? But yeah, but the other thing I always tell students to ask, and I'll ask you, is are you missing out on merit aid opportunities, and are you missing out on scholarships? I already know your answer for early, but do you miss out if you don't apply early? Are there things that are advantageous for early appliers?
Nothing that I can think of where it's like this scholarship depends on an early application. I do think the Jefferson Scholarship, which is the full tuition scholarship at UVA, they suggest that people submit early because you hear your decision before the later rounds of the Jefferson are happening. And it would be a shame for a student to invest time and energy in prepping for those later rounds if they still don't even know their admission decision. But again, like, it's not like being nominated for the Jefferson is dependent on applying early. The schools are nominating the students. We do get to nominate some of our early round kids to be considered as at-large candidates for Jefferson. And there's also scholarships. And I always tell students, well, this one scholarship is early, you know, like for a particular school, I'm like, there's also other scholarships. This one merit aid thing is early. I'm like, I promise you, nobody's cutting off merit. Maybe there are colleges, smaller colleges, that they do have to cut them off. But these bigger colleges, they have to also make investments to ensure you're coming. So if you're a really strong candidate, the financial incentives will be there.